Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Mazza on Ravens here on the Mazza on Bets and Ravens YouTube channel. This is our first episode. Obviously, I've done our first two episodes of Mazza on Mets. They're uploaded on the YouTube channel right now. You can check it out anytime, any place, anywhere, wherever you want to do it, whenever you can. But today is the first episode of Mazza on Ravens, and really what we're going to do is talk about the season from before, just give a quick recap of the 2024 season for the Ravens and how it went. We'll recap a bit of their offseason activities so far to this point, and currently what's going on. Right now, of course, the Ravens are in OTAs. They're getting prepared for mandatory minicamp coming up next week. So, before you know it, training camp will be here, and before you know it, the preseason will be here. Before you know it, the regular season will be here. That's how the NFL goes. The NFL is yearly. The NFL is the one-off season that is yearly. It's you got this regular season from September to December, early January. Then you got the playoffs, and then you got the Super Bowl, and then you have the combine. Then you got the pro days. You got free agency, then the pro days, then the draft, then another couple waves of free agency, then OTAs, mini camp, training camp, preseason. Then you're back to the regular season. So right now we're at the mini camp. Right now we're at the OTAs, heading into mandatory mini camp stage for the Baltimore Ravens as they prepare for the 2025 season. Another big 2025 season that they're coming into because off the heels of a pretty good 2024 year that ended in disappointment, which has been the theme of the Ravens really since the 2018 season. A lot of great regular seasons, records, shattering offenses, a very, very great dominant stud defense. And unfortunately, come postseason time, you know, come postseason time, they tend to slip on the banana peel and land on their faces. And again, that's I think the story again of 2024. You know, a great regular season. Lamar Jackson has probably the best year of his career, which is pretty crazy considering he's won MVP twice. But I would say this season for Lamar Jackson was the best season of his career this past season. And he didn't win MVP. It went to Josh Allen. We won't talk about that. That's not something it's not something, it is what not to say like, oh, Allen didn't deserve it. I think Josh Allen certainly deserved MVP. He was fantastic last season. We're already a few months past it. Um, but Lamar, I thought had a better season this season than he did the year before, you know, and he won MVP last year, but almost unanimously again. But he has a great year. Derrick Henry has a great year. The offense has a great year. Zay Flowers becomes the first Ravens wide receiver ever to be voted to the Pro Bowl in their 29th season. But their defense got off to a slow start at the beginning of the season, but second half down the stretch, they were very good. They looked more like the Ravens defense that we know. Kyle Van Noy was spectacular again for the second year in a row, which is, amazing. They got him in week 4 of the 2023 season. He took off and was great from there. Him and Jadeveon Clowney. And then he comes back next season. You're thinking, he might not do what he did the year before. No, he does that and better, you know. So Kyle Hamilton has a great year. Nate Wiggins emerges, and Marlon Humphrey had a bounce back season. Marlon Humphrey um, came back, I felt, from a couple of years where he really didn't play like himself, and he came back last year. I thought he had a great year, made some terrific plays, and obviously the biggest play was the interception, pick six off Russell Wilson that essentially clinched the Ravens the division title. Um, so they ended up winning the division. They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The second time they beat the Steelers this season. And that set up the matchup with the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And they defeated the Bills in the regular season, pretty much dominated them in the regular season. Week 4, it was week 4 because Ravens got off to that 0-2 start, beat the Cowboys, and then beat Buffalo. And then, so they win that game, and you go, okay, they got a chance to beat Buffalo in the playoffs. Obviously, it's different now. It's in Buffalo. It's January. It's colder. It's snow. But you like their chances. You like their chances coming to the game. And you felt that, look, they're the better team. Defensively, they're better. Lamar is just as good as Jackson. They got Derrick Henry. Zay Flowers is out due to the injury, but you still felt that they could make up for it offensively. But once again, they kind of bit themselves, and once again, they kind of you know, bit themselves. It started in the first half with the interception by Lamar Jackson, then the fumble, and before you know it, they're down 21-10. And right off the bat, and I set this up because everyone likes to place blame on 89, Mark Andrews, for this game, and we'll get to him, but it started in the first half before Mark Andrews' mistakes happened. It did. You can't be down by 11 points in Buffalo in the playoffs at halftime. You just can't. You're setting yourself up in a bad spot. You cannot be down 11 points at halftime to the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Second half comes around, they make a comeback, but then Andrews has this fumble. They score the touchdown on fourth down, need a two. Again, you put yourselves in these positions to need these things in the first half. So because of that, they're in that position where they got to get that 2-point conversion, and Lamar and Andrews has the drop. So another season where they're terrific in the regular season. They actually do win a playoff game for the second year in a row. Second year in a row, they win a playoff game. And they're taking steps, and you think, okay, maybe this is the year they break through the glass ceiling and they finally get their Super Bowl under Lamar Jackson. But once again, in the playoffs, on the road or even at home, but this time on the road, they kind of you know made their own mistakes, and they had to fix that. And unfortunately, they made their own mistakes, and they had to kind of work their way to fix it. And that's just not how it's going to work come playoff time. You can't do that. You know, these teams are too good. It's one game playoffs. You have to play good for 60 minutes. And for the past 7 years, 8 years, the Ravens have not been good at playing 60-minute football in the playoffs, which is again not the norm. That hasn't been the norm for the Ravens over the years. The Ravens have usually been a very good playoff team, especially on the road. But from 2018 to now, it's been a bit of a different story. So they enter another offseason trying to find the pieces to finally get past the AFC, finally go to the Super Bowl, finally fulfill their promises and fulfill their potential of being a Super Bowl caliber championship team, especially when you have a top 3 quarterback in the game like Jackson. Especially when you have that kind of quarterback and that kind of talented quarterback with the guy with the gifts that he has, and you're trying to break through. It ain't easy. It's never easy, but it ain't easy. You got Pat Mahomes in the AFC, who's the best quarterback, in my opinion, still in the league. You got Josh Allen, who is, in my opinion, the second best quarterback in the National Football League. So it's not easy. It wasn't easy years ago when Joe Flacco and the Ravens had to do it with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Philip Rivers in the AFC, and even Ben Roethlisberger, of course, in the AFC. It wasn't easy then. It wasn't easy too when they had to go through Steve McNair and Rich Gannon in the AFC. And it's not easy now. Now you have Pat Mahomes, who is an all-time great quarterback, and you have Josh Allen, who is a gifted quarterback, just like Lamar Jackson is. So, it's never easy. And the Ravens now have to work through another offseason with all the talent they have on paper. And you look at the talent and you go, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? What do we have to do to break through and finally get to the Super Bowl? So they enter the offseason with that goal in mind. Once again, it's not the first time, but what do we have to do to break through? The Ravens then go out and sign DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. First week or so into free agency, they signed him. My reaction to that was I thought it was a decent signing. DeAndre, you're not going to get the prime DeAndre Hopkins that you got in Houston. But I think Hopkins works as a great third down guy, great at the goal line. He's going to be someone Lamar goes to a lot in those spots and getting first downs and for touchdowns. So I think, and he'll use his size, and he's got great hands. He's always had great hands. He'll use his size and his build to go up and catch the ball for Jackson. I think he could be what Anquan Boldin was for Joe Flacco. I think he can be that kind of guy. So I think that's the expectation. We're not expecting him to be prime Hopkins, although that'd be nice, but you're not expecting him to be prime DeAndre Hopkins. You're expecting him to just go up, get the pass, convert third downs, score touchdowns when they get to the goal line. So I think that was a decent signing. He adds more depth to the receiver room with Zay Flowers, with Rashod Bateman. So I thought that was a thumbs up signing there. Um, they then get an extension done with Derrick Henry, and again, what Derrick Henry brought to the table is he was Derrick Henry. He was just Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry went out there and did Derrick Henry things last year. He looked like he didn't lose a step. All the stuff about, oh, he's 30, 31 years old, got a lot of mileage. Understood, understandable, but this is Derrick Henry we're talking about. You know, you know, that this is Derrick Henry we're talking about. Derrick Henry is, you know, one in a million. You know, this is Derrick Henry we're talking about. Derrick Henry went out there in 2024 and did Derrick Henry things and almost ran for 2,000 yards again. So it was only fitting that the Ravens would give him an extension, extend him, keep him around for at least a couple more years. So that deal got done. And then, of course, there was the release of Justin Tucker. And amidst all the allegations against him, uh, you know, it's obviously not what everybody envisioned. How how Justin Tucker's tenure would come like this. You know, nobody thought of this. Nobody figured that this would be the case for Justin Tucker. You know, years ago when he was the best kicker in football, and he was making every kick known to man, and he was the best kicker in the world. So it, it's a, it's it is what it is. They had to release him. So, and Tucker has nobody to blame but himself. That's it. And we sit here now and Justin Tucker doesn't have a gig. And he probably will never ever sign. He'll probably never ever sign with the team, at least this season. I could see him possibly signing with the team next year, barring if the situation escalates for him. But as far as the 2025 season, I don't think you'll ever see Justin Tucker kick a football for a team this season, at least this season. It may never be again, ever, but at least this season, I don't think you'll ever see Justin Tucker kick a football for any team this season. The Ravens did what they had to do. They had to release him. And now in comes Tyler Loop, who's going to be competing, the 6th round pick, who's now going to be competing for the kicker job. And on that comes the draft. Malachi Starks, 1st round pick. He adds now to the safety position and the defensive backs position, already a position that's strong for the Ravens, highlighted by Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, now enters year 2 after a good rookie season. They drafted Mike Green, who obviously comes in with a little bit of baggage, but if he keeps his head on straight, he could be a very, very good young pass. And the Ravens have lacked young stud pass rushers over the last couple of years. Again, they've had to use Jadeveon Clowney. They've had to have Kyle Van Noy. Matt Judon left a few years ago. Zadarius Smith left a few years ago. They still have Odafe Owe, but he's coming off really just the one good season. So Odafe Owe has been with the team as a 1st round pick since 2021, and 2024, his 4th season, was really his one good year. And now he enters a contract season. So, the Ravens know a guy who comes in a contract year, plays, especially on defense, plays well. You know what's going to happen. He's going to get good. He's going to get paid. So Odafe Owe comes in. He's looking to get a big year, and he'll look to get paid in the offseason. So the Ravens have to keep investing on a young pass rusher, and they get one of the top pass rushers of the draft, and Mike Green, who falls to them in the draft. But that's also because of the baggage that comes with him. You have to hope that he's got everything in check. You got to hope that the baggage doesn't continue. If it doesn't, he could be a very big impact player for this team over the next decade, so because he's that talented. And then post-draft, just recently, as the Ravens continue with their workouts, continue with OTAs, and enter mandatory minicamp, they get a deal done with Rashod Bateman. Interesting with Rashod Bateman. He actually had some teams looking to trade for him. The Ravens actually put him, this was revealed after they gave him the extension, but the Ravens actually asked him, or seeked him permission to go seek a trade, see what his market was out there. And apparently his market was actually pretty good. And I'm sure, and maybe that stunned the Ravens a bit. Maybe the Ravens didn't think that Rashod Bateman had a market, or at least had a big market. But apparently his market was pretty big. And after that, the Ravens said, "Well, okay, I guess we got to extend you." So, it ended up working out for the Ravens. They now agreed to an extension with Rashod Bateman, and he's now here for the foreseeable future. And look, good for Rashod Bateman. He had some injuries the first couple of years, struggled a bit in 2023. There was some talk about whether it's the lack of chemistry with Jackson, or Jackson maybe didn't see him when he was open, or maybe it was drops or injuries, whatever it was. There was just something that didn't click with Rashod Bateman for the first 3 seasons of his career. And you knew the talent was there. You knew he can get separation. You knew he was a big playmaker when he got separation. So it just felt like, for me, it felt like him and Jackson just weren't on the same page over the first 3 seasons. And some of it, I think, has to do with the fact that Rashod Bateman missed a lot of time in his first couple of years, whether it was training camp, practices, games. Him and Jackson couldn't they couldn't garner a chemistry, and that happens. But they kept him around after his third season, when it looked like he might be a bust, but they kept him around after the 2023 season. They gave him a contract, and they essentially said, "Hey, go out there and prove it. Go out there and show your first round pick potential." And he did. Last year was a big breakout year for him. He scored 7 touchdowns. Him and Jackson were on the same page. He was open, and he had a big year. So he gets rewarded with a contract, and now he's around for the foreseeable future. Now him and Zay Flowers, along with DeAndre Hopkins, now complete a pretty good wide receiver room. So good for Rashod Bateman. Uh, Congratulations to him. That's great for him to get his contract. And now Jackson has Bateman, Flowers, Hopkins, Isaiah Likely, who will enter a big season, because I believe, yeah, this is a contract year for Rashod Bateman, because his rookie year was 2022. So he enters a contract year, and that brings us to Mark Andrews. Obviously, the talk of Mark Andrews was the Ravens should release him, they should trade him. He's got a big cap number. They got Isaiah Likely. He's entering a free agent season. So obviously, Andrews is also entering a free agent season. So can't keep both. There's there's the drop stuff with Andrews and the fumble with Andrews. So, you know, you know, all the talk was Mark Andrews needs to, all the talk was Mark Andrews and the Ravens need to part ways. All the talk was the Ravens have to trade Mark Andrews. They have to find someone, release him, and move on to Isaiah Likely. And here we are. Here we are. It's June, and here we are. And Mark Andrews is still on the team. And they couldn't find a trade partner before the draft. They couldn't find a trade partner during the draft. So, for all intents and purposes, Mark Andrews will begin the NFL season week 1 on the Baltimore Ravens roster. And I call it, you know, because we've all watched him since he became a Raven in 2018. I'm happy he's back. Look, I know his playoff numbers aren't good, but then again, nobody's playoff numbers on this team are good, and that includes the quarterback. Mark Andrews isn't the only guy who hasn't been good in the playoffs for the Baltimore Ravens over the past 8 years or 7 years. That includes the quarterback as well. Everybody hasn't. This isn't just a one guy thing. It's not just Mark Andrews or Lamar, or it's a whole team thing. The whole team has not been good in January. That's just how it is. It's just how it is. But Mark Andrews is still a very talented player. He's still one of the best tight ends in all football. He's Lamar's top playmaker, Lamar's top guy to go to. Lamar loves him. That's another reason. Lamar Jackson loves him. So I think it's always important to keep your quarterback happy. Keep your franchise guy happy. Keep his guys around. And I think it's also, I think it makes for a good story to see Mark Andrews bounce back from Buffalo. I think it makes a good story to see Mark Andrews bounce back if he can. That doesn't mean that it takes snaps away from Isaiah Likely. It doesn't mean Isaiah Likely shouldn't get snaps. It doesn't mean Isaiah Likely won't be great for this team. But, you want to keep both. I think the Ravens prefer to keep both around. And Isaiah Likely has already showed you last year that even with Mark Andrews around, he could still be a big playmaker. So I think it's good to have both of them on the same field together. It does leave a bit of a offseason question with the both of them, and I assume the Ravens will pay Likely at the end of the season. Who knows what happens with Mark Andrews at the end of the season? But I think Mark Andrews deserves an opportunity and deserves a chance to bounce back from Buffalo. Look, he still had a good year last year. Like, he got off to a slow start last year, Mark Andrews, but he still ended up having a very, very good year. You know, he still finished off the season very well. You know, so but you got Andrews now back, and you have Isaiah Likely, and you have Derrick Henry, and you still have Justice Hill. You have a solid offensive line. This offense is set. This offense is set. They have competition at guard. That's really the big question now on the offense with the offensive line. It's going to be the configuration of the offensive line and where they are at guard, where they are right tackle. So that's going to be the big question mark for them as they head mini camp and into training camp. It's going to be the offensive line. And again, got to protect your quarterback and you got to run the football. So we'll see what happens We'll see what happens at the guard position. But again, all in all, aside from the release of Justin Tucker, obviously, in a situation that wasn't foreseen, it's been, again, a productive offseason to this point for them. And I think many would say this has been a pretty good offseason, minus Tucker. Aside from the Tucker situation, aside from his situation, this has been a pretty good offseason for them. The draft has gotten high praise. The free agency moves have gotten high praise. They also brought in Chidobe Awuzie to help out in the secondary. So, this seems to be, but again, it's a very interesting thing because, with their offseason, because it's not like this is a team that needs to add a lot. This is not a team that has to add a lot. This is a team that already has, you look at their roster, you look at the yearbook program, and you go, oh, this is a Super Bowl caliber team. And you have a top 5 head coach, and you have John Harbaugh. This is a top 5 roster, top 5 team, top 5 head coach, top 5 or so front office, and with a top 5 GM, a top 5 owner. There's not, in terms of player personnel in the roster, there's really not a whole lot you can add. At the end of the day, for this team, when it comes to it, for this team, it comes to performance in January. It comes to doing it in January. It comes to winning these games in January as a team and putting everything together. Finally, putting it all together. That's what it comes down to for this team. There's not a whole lot to add with this roster. Anybody you add is a bonus. They didn't need DeAndre Hopkins. They didn't need DeAndre Hopkins, but they got him because he adds something. It's a bonus. They didn't need him, but it's a bonus. They have Tez Walker as well, developing guy who they drafted in the 4th round, I believe, of last year. So, they don't need anybody. They don't need it. There's no big need on this team. The talent is there. The talent is there. It's about going out there and performing and winning games. And we know they can win games in the regular season. It's about the playoffs. So, but Rashod Bateman's contract and Derrick Henry's contract comes to where that there's going to be more. Henry got extended. Rashod Bateman got extended. I believe there was I think there was a contract also with Marlon Humphrey as well. But it comes down to who gets paid next. And the obvious person that's going to get paid next is Lamar himself. He's seen other quarterbacks get paid. Josh Allen recently got paid. Jalen Hurts got paid, of course. Actually Hurts got paid shortly after Jackson got paid, but Allen got a new contract. So Joe Burrow recently got a contract. So Jackson's getting paid. He is. So that's going to be the first one that comes, or at least one of the first. Or at least the top contender, the top guy left on this team that's going to get paid. You know, Lamar's getting paid. He's going to get his money, and the Ravens will give him everything in the world. So Jackson will be one of the first guys up. I think Jackson will be one of the first guys up now that Bateman's done to get paid and Derrick Henry's contract is extended. So Lamar will get paid. After him, I assume will be Kyle Hamilton. Kyle is one of the best. Kyle is the best safety in the league. He's probably the best, maybe the best defensive player on the team. I would say he is. Some might say Roquan Smith. Some might say Nnamdi Madubuike. Um, some might even say, but some might even say maybe Marlon Humphrey. But I would say it's Kyle Hamilton. I think Kyle Hamilton's the best defensive player on this team. The best offensive player on this team is Lamar Jackson. Best player on the team. The best defensive player on the team is Kyle Hamilton. So Kyle Hamilton, I think, is probably next to get paid after Jackson. He'll get paid. He'll get top money as a safety. And then after him, will be Tyler Linderbaum. Linderbaum will be more interesting to watch. He's a center. But again, core guy, just like Jackson is on this offense, just like Hamilton is, just like Derrick Henry. Core guy on this offense, in the middle of the offensive line, in the trenches, blocking for Derrick Henry, blocking for Justice Hill, blocking for those guys. It's he's a core guy in the middle of that offensive line. It'll be more interesting with him because he's not as impactful as Hamilton or Jackson, but still he plays offensive line, key spot at center, middle of the line. Ravens are a physical team, that goes guard to guard, north south, run it down your throat. So I think Linderbaum might be more interesting with him, but I think Linderbaum will eventually get paid. So I think that's will be the remaining activity for the Ravens this offseason, unless they make another corresponding move, which brings us to Jari Alexander, who recently got released by the Green Bay Packers, and he's been on the Ravens' radar for at least a year or so. Teams have called him up for trade. The Buffalo Bills called up to trade for him, but they couldn't get a deal done, and now he's released. And apparently, according to Josina Anderson, 6 teams have already contacted Jari Alexander, which makes sense. He's one of the best corners in football, and now he's available freely on the market. So, I'm sure one of those 6 teams has to be Eric DeCosta. One of those 6 teams has to be the Ravens, and they're calling up Jari Alexander's camp and Jari Alexander and his agent to see what they can do to get a deal done. I think Jari Alexander would be a great addition to the Ravens. You put him at defensive back. You put him next to Nate Wiggins. You put him next to Marlon Humphrey. Put him right there with Kyle Hamilton. Put him there with Malachi Starks. And I think the Ravens could have the best secondary in football. And in a division with Joe Burrow, in a division that now includes Aaron Rodgers, we'll get to him, in a division that, whether it's Joe Flacco or Shedeur Sanders or Gabriel or Pickett, in a conference with Josh Allen, in a conference with Patrick Mahomes, in a conference with Justin Herbert, and then you look at the NFC with Jalen Hurts, et cetera, with Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. Bottom line is you need to stop the pass. And adding a Jari Alexander would really, really strengthen the Ravens' defensive backs and strengthen their secondary. If they can get a deal done. Because it seems like the Buffalo Bills are interested in him too. And I'm sure the Buffalo Bills, because they need help in the secondary as well, they need some corners and safeties as well. I'm sure they will, now that he's available on the free agent market, I'm sure they're trying their best to get him into the building and signing him. So like I said before on Mazza on Mets, it could very well be the Ravens and the Bills going at it for him. So I think Jari, if they can sign him, will be a big move for the Ravens. We'll see what happens, but it's not every day that a defensive player of his caliber is available, It's not every day that a player like him of his caliber is available right now at this time of year. It's not every day that happens. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see. We'll see how Jar Alexander goes. Now, let's go around the AFC North. Talked about him before. Just said him. Aaron Rodgers. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. And, it seemed like that was always going to happen the moment that he was released by the Jets. And now he's a Steeler. And the Ravens will now face him 2 times a year. And look, I think he adds at least a sense of professional quarterback. It's funny, it's funny. The Ravens, before the last 2 times they met the Steelers in the regular season and the playoffs, they had trouble beating the Steelers with the Kenny Pickett's, with the Mason Rudolphs and the Duck Hodgeses and the Mitch Trubisky's. They had trouble beating them. They lost to Kenny Pickett twice. It's a team that lost to Kenny Pickett twice in Baltimore in the final minutes, and then in Pittsburgh in 2020. Pittsburgh in 2023 in the final minutes. They lost to Pickett in 2022 in the final minutes in Baltimore. You know, they lost to him. They lost to him to Baltimore. They lost to him in Baltimore in 2022 in the final minutes. They lost to him in Pittsburgh in the final minutes in 2023. They lost to Russell Wilson at the beginning in the first matchup last year. So, which also included Justin Fields because I think he made a couple plays at the end as well. So the Ravens were having trouble beating the Steelers without them having much production at the quarterback position, and now here comes Aaron Rodgers, and he's coming off a season that statistically the numbers aren't too bad. Actually, he almost threw for 4,000 yards, 28 touchdown passes. He did throw 11 interceptions, but still 28-11. That's still pretty good. Almost 4,000 yards, 3,890 something yards. That's still pretty good. Aaron Rodgers had a good second half of the season, and that was always, I think, going to be what happened to Rodgers. Again, he's a 40-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. He was probably always going to struggle in the first half, or at least have some ups and downs in the first half before picking up in the second half, which is what happened. It just so happened it was with a team like the Jets that had high expectations, and they were trying to win and make the playoffs. But now Rodgers is a Steeler, and better team. Regardless of how we look at the Steelers now and their lack of playoff success, it's still a good football team, a good football organization, good coach, good front office, well structured, well cultured. He now goes to a place like that was just like what Green Bay was. He's not in a he's not in a circus like he was with the Jets. Even though Aaron Rodgers was the cause of some of the circuses the last 2 years, but even still, he's not in that kind of situation with the Jets. He's now back in a similar sort of situation that he was in Green Bay. He goes to Pittsburgh. And defensively, they're still very strong. They run the football. They did get DK Metcalf, and I think him and Rodgers will have a connection. It's just how much could Rodgers bring to the table? But I think what the Ravens' challenge will be with Rodgers is he will bring a sense of professionalism, and also he's Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers quarterback position. The Steelers now have a quarterback that you go, oh yeah, we got, it's Aaron Rodgers. Russell hasn't been that guy since Seattle. They certainly weren't getting that with Mason Rudolph. They certainly were not going to they didn't get that with Mitch Trubisky. They didn't get it with Kenny Pickett. So now you have Rodgers, who again, second half was pretty good for the Jets last year. And now he's 1 full year removed from the torn Achilles, 1 full year removed from the torn Achilles. I'm not going to say Rodgers is going to be what he was from 2009 to 2019, 20, 21, where he was winning MVPs and the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl MVP and be the Hall of Famer. I don't think he will be for Pittsburgh. I don't think he will be for the Steelers, but I still think he can give them solid quarterback play, and I think the Ravens will be challenged by that. Because again, that's a defense. They still got a good defense. And speaking of the defense, TJ Watt, he's now holding out, looking for a new contract. I think, I just heard Colin Cowherd. I just heard him say that the Pittsburgh Steelers should trade TJ Watt. And I get it in a sense. 31 years old, defensive player. Steelers should invest more in offense, but that's just not who the Steelers are. The Steelers are like the Ravens, defensive oriented, defensive minded, pay your impact defensive players. They've always been that way, always will be that way. It's what made the Steelers successful. It's what made the Ravens successful. I don't think it would be a good idea for the Steelers to trade TJ Watt, and I don't think they will. I think they will pay TJ. TJ Watt has won them a lot of games with the Steelers, with the way their offense has been over these number of years, and that includes the last few years, and that includes Roethlisberger in from 2018, 19, 20 or so to 21. That includes those years of Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph, to Kenny Pickett, to Russell Wilson, post Seattle, to Justin Fields, to TJ Watt has won the Steelers a lot of football games. Like he's won them a lot of football games. And you know who he's also really good against? He's good against the Ravens. He's good against the Ravens. That's another team he's really good against. He's good against the Baltimore Ravens. That's another team he's good against. TJ Watt has made a lot of big plays against the Ravens. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you got to face Lamar Jackson twice a year, I think you'd want TJ Watt on your team. TJ Watt has made a lot of big plays against Lamar Jackson. Like I said, he's done very well against the Ravens. If you're the Steelers and you're a Steeler fan, are you sure you want to lose that guy? Are you sure you want to trade that guy? Regardless of the draft picks you can get, regardless of the haul you can get, regardless of anything you can get, I don't agree with Colin Cowherd on that one. I don't think the Steelers should trade. I don't think the Steelers should trade TJ Watt. He's too good of an impact player. And I think they will get a contract done with him. I think they will get a contract done with him. I think TJ Watt's going to stay there. The Bengals, on the other hand, as we continue to go around the AFC North, Bengals, on the other hand, I think they're going to end up trading Trey Hendrickson, which would be their defense isn't very good. And Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense score a lot of points, but that defense isn't very good. I don't know if it'd be wise to trade away Trey Hendrickson, but they may have. But they paid Chase, they paid Higgins. Hendrickson might be traded. So I'm not. I'm as sure as I am that the Steelers will extend TJ Watt. I'm not as sure about Trey Hendrickson. We'll see. Bengals did. The Bengals paid both of them. Paid both Chase and Higgins. Maybe they do find a way to pay Hendrickson, but we'll see. But they need defensive players. Bengals need defensive players. Then we go to the Browns, and of course their quarterback situation. I don't know what's going to happen. If you would have asked me, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I think week one, Joe Flacco is going to be the starter. I think week one, Joe Flacco is going to be the starter. Week two, you're going to get Lamar, Flacco in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium. Joe Flacco's returned to Baltimore for the first time since he was traded after the 2018 season. That's just my guess. That's just my opinion. That is just my feel for what we're going to see from the Cleveland Browns at the start of the season. What's going to happen week 9, week 10, week 11, week 12, 13, 14? I don't know. You and I don't know. You and I will find out when we get there. You and I will find out week 9, week 10, week 11, week 12. If I had to guess, Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback. Kenny Pickett will be the one either traded or released. My guess is traded because teams will need a quarterback. A team like the New Orleans Saints could certainly use a quarterback. Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, who's the backup to that? I don't know. We'll find out at training camp in the preseason who wins out that spot. But I think week one, Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback against Cincinnati Bengals when they have their first game, while the Ravens go to Buffalo. And I think week two, it will be Flacco against Jackson in Baltimore. That's just my guess. I could be wrong. The Ravens may end up facing Shedeur Sanders week two. Maybe they face Dylan Gabriel. Maybe they face Kenny Pickett. I don't know. But it's a very, very fascinating and very, very interesting situation up in Cleveland. A 4 quarterback, well, 5 if you want to count Deshaun Watson, but I don't think Deshaun Watson will play this season. But a four quarterback uh thing in Cleveland. And I guess you can say with the Browns, hey, it's the Browns. Of course, they have a four quarterback carousel in Cleveland. For me, you know, like seeing Joe Flacco there once again in Cleveland, it's like, hey, and it's like, man, you really, man, I know you liked it there. I know you loved being Cleveland, and they loved you there 2 years ago, and they chanted your name, and I was happy for him, that he got to the playoffs with the Browns, and even I thought it was cool. You know, if the Ravens and Browns met them in the playoffs, yeah, had to beat, yeah, the Ravens would have had to win that game, of course, but that didn't happen. Houston ended up beating them in the playoffs, but yeah, I was happy to see Joe Flacco do what he did in Cleveland 2 years ago. I thought it was pretty cool, and I can understand why he wanted to go back. I can understand he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave to go to Indianapolis or anywhere else. He wanted to stay in Cleveland. You know, would I prefer Joe Flacco came back and was the backup quarterback for the Ravens instead of the Ravens backup situation they have now, which is now Cooper Rush, and reading reports out of OTAs, he's struggling right there in OT. So reading reports out of OTAs, he's struggling. And last year was Josh Johnson. And of course, it was Tyler Huntley before that. So, like, yeah, would I prefer Joe Flacco as the backup, for not just for nostalgia and to see him back in a Ravens uniform. But I think he'd be a much better option as the backup instead of their current options and the options they've had the previous years. Sure. But I can understand why he went back to Cleveland. He loved it there and he has a chance to start. He loved it there and he has a chance to start. I can totally understand. But boy, it's a lot. But boy, it's a, it's a carousel. It's a circus, and it's a circus that has a Sanders in there with Shador, and you know what that brings. But it's going to be interesting because you got four guys who are going to be battling out for the starting spot, and I think it will be Flacco week one, but it is the Browns. Maybe it's Kenny Pickett. Maybe it's Shador. Maybe it is Shador. Maybe we see a fifth round rookie quarterback starting the season off for a football team. Maybe it's a fourth, maybe it's a fifth round. Maybe we see a fifth round rookie quarterback start the season for an NFL team. We don't see that. We don't ever see that. You know, we don't see that. You know, I don't think it will, and I don't think it will change. Don't think it will happen. You know, because it's just again, he's a fifth round draft pick, regardless of how we feel, regardless of how we all felt about Chidori going to the draft. He ended up being a fifth round. He was a fifth round pick. He was a fifth round pick. But I think it will be Flacco week one, and I think week two, yeah, it's going to be Ravens Browns, Jackson Flacco for the second time, and I think Jackson Flacco, and I think it will be, and it will be an interesting matchup. So, Flacco's return to Baltimore, it should be interesting and also kind of fun to see Flacco back in Baltimore. So, but that'll wrap. But that's your AFC North wrap around the division. That's your AFC North roundup. Or your around the AFC North division this offseason, along with the Ravens right now. Uh, it's interesting. I think the best way to describe the AFC North right now is that the Ravens are really the only functional franchise right now. And that says a lot considering the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the division, but even they are kind of a bit in flux. With the quarterback situation, bringing in a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, the TJ Watt contract stuff, uh, the fact that they haven't won a playoff game in almost 10 years. They're good. They win. They make the playoffs, but that's not the standard in Pittsburgh. The standard in Pittsburgh is the standard in Baltimore. It's winning championships. It's winning playoff games and winning championships. They haven't won a playoff game since 2016. So, so there's a lot of pressure there. Cincinnati has got their situation with Trey Hendrickson. Cleveland has now got their situation in quarterback. The Ravens, they're the only stable, functional, know what they are team in this division. They're really the only ones. If you really look at this division, they're like the only ones. So as we progress into the offseason, as we progress into training camp, more things will be, the Ravens will see what they have in terms of their offensive line, see how Malachi Stark's progressing, see how Mike Green's progressing. Lamar will be there and see if the contracts are done. Bateman's contract, Jackson's contract. Oh, no, not Bateman, excuse me. Jackson's contract, Linderbaum's contract, um, Kyle Hamilton if he gets a contract. So that's the things we're going to be looking forward to as we get to mini camp and as we get to training camp. But again, it should be an interesting off season as we get to training camp, and I think the Ravens again should be good, but it's about what happens in January. It's about what happens in January. You know, I think we've gotten to the point, you know, we've gotten to the point with the Ravens where, again, you don't want to say, oh, who cares about the regular season? But I think we've kind of gotten to that point, right? It's like, oh, yeah, they won 10, 11, 12 games. Okay. What are you going to do in January? Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Well, look at wow, they won 13 games. They won 14 games. What do you do in January? We've gotten to that point with the Ravens. We have gotten to that point. So, again, it's not saying the regular season doesn't, of course, regular season matters a lot, and we should all enjoy the regular season, 16 games, now 17. But but that's just what it is now with the Ravens, I think. I think that's the attitude for a lot of Ravens fans now. It's, you got to win in January. You got to beat the Chiefs in January. You had them at home 2 years ago in the AFC Championship game, and you lost. You got to beat the Bills. You've had them twice in Buffalo. Tough place to play, tough place to win. I get it, but you've had them. They should have won both those games, but they didn't. Tennessee at home, 2019, big favorite, lost. Chargers at home, winnable game, lost. You know, 2022, 2022 against the Bengals, even without Lamar Jackson, with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Huntley played a good game, but but didn't happen. You know, biggest opportunity was 2 years ago in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. That was the biggest opportunity. And they got to get back to that. They got to get back to that time, to that moment. They got to get back to the AFC Championship game. They gotta get over the end zone. They gotta get into the end zone. They gotta get to the AFC Championship game and get to the touchdown. That's what they gotta do. So, but we'll get there when we get there. It's still June. We'll get there when we get there. It's still the off season. Mandatory mini camp is a few days away or a week away, excuse me, and we'll see how things go. Uh, we'll do another show next week because right now, obviously, the Mets are in the middle of their season. Uh, we're gonna do a lot more Mazza on Mets because again, their season's going on. So we'll do more Mazza on Mets as the weeks and days go as the weeks go on. But we'll make sure to stick in. We'll make sure to get some Ravens coverage and Ravens shows in the future. I will look forward to do another Ravens podcast next week, as mandatory minicamp begins. So get some insight on what's going on mandatory minicamp, get some insight of what's going on, competitions, maybe another contract done here or there, what Harbaugh has to say, or any other coach has to say, what the players are saying. So next week, as we get to mandatory minicamp, we'll do another podcast. But for now, stay tuned for next Thursday, or excuse me, this Thursday, we will do Mazza on Mets as we recap the upcoming Mets series with the Washington Nationals and preview their series with the Tampa Bay Rays. Got a nice little episode too for Mazza on Mets on Friday. I have a special guest with some family members. My brother and my father will join. We'll just talk all Mets and talk about the season, talk about the teams, talk about the team, and maybe dive into we'll maybe talk a little bit of history. There's a lot of history with us as Met fans, with my brother and myself and my dad. So that'll be a special episode on Friday of Mazza on Mets. But for Mazza on Ravens, we'll see you again for sometime next week as we talk as minicamp begins and as the regular season is fastly approaching. Before you know it, it will be week 1 at Buffalo, Sunday Night Football, and the Ravens will play the Bills. But regular season is fast approaching. But for now, mini camps next week, training camp a month from now. So that'll be it. That'll do it for the first episode of Mazza on Ravens. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to me, Evan Mazza, talk about all things Baltimore Ravens as we get to the regular season, as we approach the regular season. Have yourselves a great day, and let's go Ravens.